actually do work now.
You can do the jaw shot with it.
Oh, it's good to see you guys. I hope all is well. You're welcome to stay on camera or not. Just so you're aware, any contributions you make will be, of course, included in the YouTube when I post this up there. So be careful about what you say. It's fun doing these Bob's Your Script Uncle sessions, and I thought when I first started out that it would be it would be appropriate amount of lead time to announce the subject matter on Monday and then talk about them on Wednesday. And what I've learned this week is that even that seems like it might be a lot of lead time. It's too much lead time, because I think that people have almost finished talking about the Oscars and it moved on to the next thing. If I were to have announced this morning what the topic was going to be, I would have chosen probably the Ted Lasso premiere, which I am not going to discuss, even though I've seen it, because I'm sure that it would spoil most people since it's been live. I mean, the ink is still wet on it. But we are going to talk about the Oscars today. And I am going to, just so that we all are aware, trying to focus a lot more these days on positivity and sending good energy out into the world with regards to all these things that I talk about, especially movies and TV. I think that it's a good habit for us all to get into, to be less critical, especially in a public forum, because we all hope to be part of the industry someday too. And I know, just looking at the names and the faces that are here, that several of you have already made your own stuff and therefore probably have dealt with what you consider to be unfair criticism, or perhaps fair criticism that it's still hurtful. James, I'm going to go ahead and just mute you so that background noise, so that I am the only source of background noise, since I hear ambulances going by outside. It's difficult to receive criticism even from strangers on the internet and whatnot. And I think that, especially, I don't know how you guys feel, but my experience on Monday and yesterday were very, it was darkening to my soul to read a lot of the social media going around about the Oscars, about the awards that were issued, about the or that were awarded, about who was nominated and who wasn't. We hear the phrase all the time about blowback, or about how movies that somehow, particularly smaller movies or independent films that somehow catch lightning in a bottle and get a popular groundswell of fandom, there's always like a second wave of people who wind up seeing them based on the popularity of the thing, and those people generally respond with negativity. Why the big deal? I remember back when I saw the Blair Witch Project, which was extraordinarily popular before found footage was even a genre all its own, and people loved it. Then people went out and saw it based on the fact that people loved it, and those people were very negative towards it. And I think that movies such as Everything Everywhere All at Once, for example, get an awful lot of pushback in the second wave among people who don't want it to succeed or don't feel like it deserves the praise and all this kind of thing. But those of us who have been or are makers of things are very know how hard it is to get anything made at all. And I think that we need to be spending a lot more of our energy putting praise on the names of people who actually get stuff made, who follow their dreams. And even if the movie isn't 100% for us, or isn't 100%, doesn't 100% resonate with us as individuals, there's still plenty of room out there to find good things to say about the industry that we all love, about storytelling, about the successful films. And it can be big overwhelming kind of conceptual, yes, things are great, but this is great at all times. But it can also be something as simple as, you know, as just not prefacing anything you say with, I didn't like this movie, but blah, blah, blah. Just try to edit the bad stuff you have to say out of your freely flowing conversations about the things that are going on out there in the world of movies and of TV and so on. It's okay to be hurting, and it's okay to be unhappy. A personal friend of mine, somebody I know, I think some of you probably know him too, wrote a movie that is very similar to that film that's on Netflix now called Fall, where the two women scale a giant broadcast tower and then get stuck up there. Very good movie, by the way. I myself have had films that I wrote that were making good progress get submarined by something that was very similar that was written, and that could be painful. And I'll be the first to admit that I probably didn't handle that particularly well, as I wrote a comedy called Mall Cop. Then when Paul Blart Mall Cop came out to bad reviews, I spent the entire weekend pasting in Facebook the quotes from the negative reviews of the movie that I felt had stolen my dream, which was, you know, that was before I learned this lesson. But I'm a work in progress. What can I say? Sorry, Kevin James, I didn't mean it. But there are a lot of very positive lessons we can learn from the experience of what happened at the Oscars on Sunday. And I have jotted down a few thoughts that I would like to share with you all here, but I would also love for you all to join the conversation as well. So feel free to unmute and say something, and join the conversation. We'll only be here for at the most an hour, but I want to make sure that everyone has their say. If you want to, just please don't attack any of these other movies or whatever. I want this to be a positive kind of space. So first thing that I thought of that we can definitely learn from the movies that were successful and the Oscar process in general is the importance of fun energy in our stories. I'm not saying that everything that we write needs to be a Fast and the Furious movie, although I do love the Fast and the Furious movies. One of my favorite releases of the past few weeks was the trailer for Fast 10 on its way. But, you know, look, I think that the Banshees of Inisherin, that Women Talking, Triangle of Sadness, All's Quiet on the Western Front, Tar, I think they're all fantastic films. They're amazing works of art that deserve all the praise they get and probably more. They are brilliant and powerful, and we should all see them. But I also think that there has been in the past a tendency for the public in general, and perhaps for those of us who are fans of film in general, to sort of take anything that's fun and energetic and exciting and almost trivialize it based on that kind of energy all by itself. And I think that we can take the lesson based on exciting, energetic, uplifting films, that there's room for those. And there's no reason to have a kind of apologetic worldview towards writing something that is fun. If you look at Top Gun Maverick, if you look at Everything Everywhere All at Once, Avatar, The Way of Water, all of which were nominated for Best Picture. And then my favorite, I know that some of you have spoken to this already, my favorite nomination from the Oscars this time around was the Best Animated Feature nomination of Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. I mean, it was never going to beat Pinocchio, but just being nominated, man, I was very encouraged by that. The award success for these movies kind of disrupt the notion that Oscar bait can only be certain things, that you have to write a you have to write and everything. You have to write an All's Quiet on the Western Front or something in order to get the sort of artistic praise that I think we all deserve. We can lift people's spirits through the energy of a story, through the ending of a story, through the positivity that is conveyed through a story, and still deal with some of these bigger issues that are extraordinarily serious and that can be sort of difficult to face. I mean, yeah, you know, the loss of a longtime friendship is difficult and challenging, or the tragedies of war are very, very difficult are very dark things that humans need to face and deserve to be explored in our art and in our movies and so on. But if you look at movies like Everything Everywhere, Top Gun, Avatar, Marcel the Shell, they also deal with themes like aging and regret and death and grief and how we deal with it, with love and responsibility, our responsibilities to each other, the choices we make, and how we dwell sometimes as humans in what could have been and what we missed out on and so on. Mental health issues, the responsibilities we have to those who came before us and those who are coming after us. All these are very deep themes to explore, but they don't need to be explored in kind of dark, glum, dreary kind of ways. They can be, but a lot of times we can convey these messages in ways that inject our audience with energy and fun and make people want to see the movie just for the experience of what the movie is or the TV show. And then sort of sneak in these themes. We talked about Cocaine Bear last week, and it is a well-written movie that deals with themes and so on, but it's actually about a bear who ate a brick of cocaine. And people who see the movie based on the audacity of the fun tone of it, or that other people, or the notion that other people are saying how good it is, our messages are being delivered that way anyway, and especially in a time like lately when the real world can be sort of challenging and sort of burdensome to us. There's something delightful to be said about delighting people. It is a great sort of lesson we can learn just by bringing energy and fun into our movies. James asks in the chat, do you think the danger the industry faced during the pandemic made this possible? The thing of Spielberg telling Tom Cruise he saved the cinemas was maybe indicative of an industry-wide reevaluation of fun films bringing people to theaters. I think yes. I mean, that Spielberg telling Tom Cruise that he saved the cinema, I think Spielberg, first of all, we need to take Spielberg's word on this kind of thing. He knows a little something about the industry. And secondly, he knew that they were on camera and he knew that they were mic'd up, and he's been around long enough to know that any mic is a hot mic. Not just you, Mike Quinn, you're a hot mic as well. The beauty of that moment is that it's true. The first movie I saw back following the pandemic was the one whose cup I drink from every day. Fast 9 came out in the waiting, near the end when people started to come back and open back up again. And I went and saw it because I love that. I love the franchise. I saw Top Gun Maverick in cinemas again. It was just a sequel, it wasn't really a franchise, but you could argue that the Tom Cruise franchise is one that attracts people. I think that people want to often go to movies for an escape, and that is a valuable thing. A lot of us can't afford to go on holidays right now, or we can't afford to just check out for a day or something. And I think that just going to the cinemas, providing that respite, is a very valuable thing that we provide and that the cinemas in general provide. Just turning off your phone for 2 hours and enjoying a movie. But as creators ourselves, as storytellers ourselves, we can deliver that energy and fun and escape and respite, but also talk about the things that are very important and have big themes involved too. I mean, it's very popular in the, or very necessary, I would even argue, in the horror genre, where if you want to talk about racism, you can make a movie that says racism is bad, or you can make a movie that has a separate kind of world experience for people of one type and for another type, and then have that symbolically told through the existence of zombies or monsters or whatever. I was talking in my my course on drama just last week about how Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a story about racism, or it takes place in the world of racism, let's say, a racist kind of world. It's a great movie, fun, it totally holds up. It's fun, it deals with genre tropes that are familiar, the story's engaging, the special effects are fun, the chases are great. But I do not think it was accidental that Zemeckis decided to, when Eddie walks into the nightclub where Jessica Rabbit sings, that all the customers in this nightclub who are being served are white men, and that all the people who are either servants, or serving, or entertaining are tunes. You just need to change one word of that to look at the 1930s in America. The word is tunes, and the thing you replace it with is people of color. So by having this situation exist in a world that is clearly fanciful, we are forced to sort of reflect on the reality of the world we're in now, or the world that we came from, and so on. And it happens without lecturing. It happens by showing something that feels like it's fun, and it is fun, but feels like it's only fun, but in reality it has sort of a deeper meaning to it. So bringing energy and fun to our screenwriting, bringing joy to our screenwriting, to our stories, is a fantastic way to convene a conversation between us and our audience about the things that are important to us. So that's the first lesson I learned. Also, just because I mentioned it and then went on to talk about other things, I want to make sure that I say clearly, find a way to see Marcel the Shell with Shoes On and watch it. It is tremendously wonderful. It is a wonderful, delightful movie that I recommend to everybody. And I actually cried out in joy when it got nominated for best animated feature. It is great. It is just really, really good and fun and funny and nice. Another great lesson that we can learn from the Oscars and the results is the importance of commitment to what we're doing. Commit to your film career. Commit. Paul Rogers, who he won the Oscar for Everything Everywhere for best editing. He won the Oscar for editing for Everything Everywhere on Sunday night. Second feature that he's ever edited. He didn't. I mean, look, I loved all the editors who were nominated, and a lot of them have been in the career for a very long time. And I think anyone who's seen Everything Everywhere will recognize that it is very. The editing is noticeable. It is the editing is a star of the show. So, and I'm glad that he won, but you know what? He edited one movie prior to this, and did a little bit on TV and so on. But the important lesson I think we can learn from this is that during film school, he would not work on his own final project. Instead, he would sort of fiddle around and edit other people's projects because he just didn't want to do his schoolwork. So he was committed to editing and so on, but also he sort of sacrificed his own kind of responsibilities in order to work on his editing, and then it turned out. It's a good piece of advice here that I offer with great joy, which is be irresponsible sometimes if it serves your writing or your filmmaking dream or career. He said, he quoted in an interview, you don't have to just work on your own stuff, you can edit for other people. We can write our own stuff, but also help others on their projects. Write something quick and dirty just to keep your hand in, focus on your own writing. I have day job responsibilities, but I have carved out a couple of hours each week to work on my own projects, to deal with other ideas that I have, and sort of get them down and so on. I've talked to so many of us who are creative, who are writers, who are filmmakers, whatever, who have in the last 2 years, especially with things being so challenging, have sort of switched from being a writer who also works as a barista to a barista who writes sometimes. Fill in for barista, whatever it is your day job is. And we have responsibilities to our families. We have responsibilities to pay the bills. I understand all that, but it's important that we maintain the energy of seeing ourselves as what we aspire to be. I mean, it's an offshoot of the old saying, dress for the job you want rather than the job that you have. I am dressed as Batman today, so that shows you how much I stand by it. But it's critical that we maintain our dream of being a screenwriter, our dream of being a filmmaker, no matter what it takes. Please forgive me for embarrassing you here, James, but I know that James just put out a short that he wrote during lockdown in pandemic, and it's out there, and he made it, and it happened. That is a story we should all take inspiration from. It's great, according to Mike, and I believe Mike, and I believe James. And even if it wasn't everything that James hoped for it to be, it is still a tremendous heroic accomplishment that we should all take as an inspiration to do the same. I don't know if it was ever James's dream to make a movie like 2 meters, but regardless of whether that specifically was his dream, that is something he was able to do to sort of maintain his journey, which leads me to the next thing I wanted to say, which was recognize the importance of the steps in between where you are and where you want to be. All progress is important. Any step is a step forward in pursuing your dream of being a screenwriter, a filmmaker, whatever it is, being a storyteller in some kind of way. 30 years ago, I think it's 29 or 31, but it's in the neighborhood of 30 years ago, there is a very little appreciated, underrated, I would add, movie released called Encino Man. Who has seen Encino Man? Not many of my British friends have probably, I don't even know if it made it over here. Encino Man was a fish out of water comedy starring Pauly Shore. And at the time, 2 actors who were part of the ensemble who had a little bit of success to that point. One of them was named Brendan Fraser, and another one was named Ke Huy Quan. Anyone know what those 2 guys have in common from last Sunday? Right? Neither of those guys, I'm sure, had dreamt of being in a movie about a caveman who is thawed out and winds up being the coolest man on campus. We're going to thaw out a caveman, send him to college, and he's going to be the coolest guy around, and we're going to learn a little lesson about ourselves. It is underappreciated, and it hits all the beats. But you know what Brendan Fraser and Ke Huy Quan did? They showed up, they did the work, they had fun, they stayed positive, they became the sort of people on set, they became the sort of people who the other people liked hanging out with. They were fantastic and wonderful. If you Google, you'll find a piece of film from last Sunday where at the follow-up party, they run into each other, each holding their Oscars. They're like, "We made it, man!" It's like, and we all remember Short Round, and we all remember the Goonies, and we all remember the Mummy from those guys. But what we forget is either before those moments of greatness or between those moments of greatness and the moment of greatness on Sunday, there were a lot of steps in the process that might have felt like a step back or a step sideways or a step diagonal away. But they just kept at it, man. And they surrounded themselves with people who encouraged them. I'll post in the chat right now the link to, there it is, Ke Huy Quan's acceptance speech, where he spends the time thanking people, as people do, and then also thanks his wife for always being there and supporting him. And you can find interview after interview where he tells the story about running into Harrison Ford and at parties and so on leading up to the Oscars, and them hugging each other, and stories about how Steven Spielberg has stayed in touch with him ever since Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Spielberg also famously did the same for Drew Barrymore. The guy seems to just actually take care of the children he puts in his movies, which is really awesome. We need to make sure that we take these steps and these opportunities that might not be precisely what you thought you wanted to be. I don't know how many writers out there have written one project and stuck with that one project for a decade or more, instead of thinking in terms of, I can do something in between. I can do something that moves me in that direction without it being the actual thing that I dream, the actual story that is most important to my heart. And if you go into it with an attitude of, I'm lucky to be doing this, this is a joyful experience, this is a step down on the journey that I want to take, it's going to be a positive experience for you, and you make it a positive experience for the people around you. And what will happen is, instead of Encino Man being the end of your journey, it will become Act 2. Encino Man is Act 2 in two very real life stories of overcoming adversity. If we're to write the story of Ke Huy Quan or Brendan Fraser, Encino Man would be the moment where they meet. The final scene would be them winning the Oscars on the same night. And 30 years ago, they couldn't have known it was going to happen. None of us knows what's going to happen. The risk of being a writer is that we think that everything that comes to pass happens for a reason, because in our stories that tends to happen. In reality, we sort of have to trust that things are going to pay off in the end. But the only way to do it is to keep churning, keep trudging along, being a person who praises others for their hard work and doing the hard work. And if we don't get the praise, we just have to be okay with it. It is a wonderful thing to be wonderful out there. There are those of us who see a lot of movies. I watch movies and TV shows like it's my job, because it kind of is. And when I get these moments, I said this last week too, or 2 weeks ago, but when I get these moments where my expectations are here and it still surpasses them, those are the moments that make the whole thing worthwhile. And the only way for that to happen is to always be out there trying stuff and watching stuff and praising people and tweeting about it and putting it on Facebook and social media and talking up these movies to other people, and never being apologetic for what you like, but also never couching it. Don't say, yeah, well, everything everywhere wasn't for me, but I really appreciate what they did. Say, I really appreciate what they did, and leave off that other stuff. It's okay. It's not being dishonest. It's putting positivity out there in a way that a lot of people don't. The downside of a world where social media is all over the place is that everyone has a voice, and not everyone thinks about what they say before they say it. We're writers. We know the power of words. We need to make sure that the words we put out there into the world serve a purpose that includes upping people who deserve it. Giselle says in the chat, she was just now working with a horror script, which Giselle never thought they would do because the co-writer asked you to. I've learned a lot. Yeah, man, write something that you never thought would be your thing. Also, write something that you're certain is your thing, but you have no idea whether there will be an audience or whether it will be sold or anything like that. Look, I wrote a script years ago, specifically because I'd lost the energy to my writing. I wasn't writing because I loved it anymore. I was writing sort of in a mercenary kind of way. And I decided I'm going to write something that I just know won't sell. I'm going to write it. And I'm sure that everyone here has heard me talk about Hitlersaurus. And I wrote it, got a lot of work off of it because of how it was written and my style of writing, even though no one wanted to make it, started turning it into a comic book. And then, you know, the world being what it is, people weren't that interested in that sort of comedy for a while. Boy, you'll never believe what happened in the last couple of weeks. I started taking meetings on Hitlersaurus again. I got someone contacted me. It was just like, you know, hey man, let's talk about Hitlersaurus. You know, I mean, will anything come of it? I don't know. It's the beginning of a new chapter, but you can't predict these things is the point. So you might as well write for who you want to write for. For me, 12-year-old Bob, right? For any of you, it might be your grandkids, or it might be yourself now, or it might be your sister, or it might be your friend. For me, the person I was at 12 years old, if he would have said, oh, that sounds cool, that's what I write. And I'll tell you what, 12-year-old Bob wanted to watch movies that were appropriate for 18-year-olds. So there's a lot of swearing and stuff in them too. But it's important that we write from a place that delivers passion to the project itself, and then write with as much enthusiasm as we can. I keep it right here on my computer, my little note to myself to remind myself, where is it? There it is. Write with joy and confidence. As a little reminder, anytime I try to compromise myself in the story, or write less, or not take bold story choices because I think they'll be more palatable, I look up at my little note to remind myself to write with joy and confidence, and I write something that will make me joyful, and that might be a decision that nobody else would make. In fact, it ought to be something that nobody else would make. Energy and fun, I said. Commit to your film career, I said. The last thing I want to mention is the no a-holes rule. There's a book called that, which, you know, I'm now considering contacting that person to see if they'll speak at the London Screenwriters Festival, even though it's not a filmmaker, because it's so important that we surround ourselves with people who want to help us succeed, but also who we want to help succeed as well. It's nourishing to help somebody out who you really believe deserves our help and who you want to see succeed. It's nourishing to receive energy from people when we really need it as well. People who instead of people who sort of doubt us, or who mention things that are flawed, or who say no without also saying yes. I already posted the link to his acceptance speech, but here's another link to Ke Huy Quan's backstage interview following his win. And you can, I mean, man, if you wake up in the morning and the coffee's just not doing it and you're tired and worn down, watch that interview for a minute. Take 60 seconds or 2 minutes to watch that. Not only is he full of energy and joy and thrill and everything, but I mean, look, it was the first time I heard him say it during the Everything Everywhere sort of press junkets and everything, but he actually says Goonies never say die in it. And I wanted to jump out of my seat and run to Hollywood and high five the guy. It's amazing. And and he also talks about how the people he knew on Goonies called him through this journey and was like, good for you, I'm proud of you. And in his acceptance speech, he talks about how his brother would call him every day and stay and remind him to take care of himself, even as things got sort of overwhelming during his Oscar run. And And it's a well-known story that the kid who played Chunk is now a lawyer who helped him negotiate his contract and was at the Oscars with him the other day. It's amazing. I mean, he stayed beloved and kind. He stayed grateful. He stayed humble. Steven Spielberg sends him Christmas presents each year, I mentioned. And Spielberg never praises himself for doing that. It's just the way that he lives his life and allows people to sort of absorb it. Remember, you guys, we do what we are. We are what we are perceived by what we do. Other people will believe that what we do is who we are. But the reality is who we are is what we do. Okay, you behave in a way that is true to yourself, and do your best. I mentioned earlier how I probably mishandled the whole mall cop situation. Yeah, I did. But we can't always behave according to our beliefs, about how we have bad days, we have sad days, we have off days, we have days where there's anger or we feel burdened and so on. And that's part of being human, man. Learning those things and channeling that energy into our stories or allowing or telling our loved ones that we need help and take care of ourselves, and reaching out to others and saying, I hope you're doing okay, just checking in, are such important things to do during these times. And it will suit your writing, even if you pour all that anger into a script that later you will sort of add the fun and energy to, I think is a great way to handle it as well. But try to consider the value of not joining in on pile-ons or bullying or conversations that could be interpreted as bullying, even if it's not your intent. If the more that we think about how our behavior, aside from what we write, impacts other people, I think it will come out reflected in the stories that get made, in the stories that we write, and the joy on the page that is going to make people want to make our movies. If your script comes across the desk of somebody who's just having a really, really bad day, or they're sick, or they have a relative who's sick, or they're having mental health issues, or any of these concerns, and your script comes across their desk and allows them to feel a warmth or feel a happiness or feel a sense of joy, then even if the film doesn't get made, you're bringing something positive to somebody who needs something brought positive too. And I think there's value in that, regardless of whether there's a paycheck at the end of it for us. Generate a world in which things are better for everyone, and hopefully that rising tide will raise all ships, including ourselves. Those are my thoughts on the Oscars. I'd love to hear what any of you have to say. Nobody. That's okay. James.
Oh, heaven, you go.
No, you go.
I was going to say, it was a thing of, I did, one thing that I noticed as well is, it very much in line with what you're saying, is I taped the ceremony and watched it first thing in the morning. And one thing I noticed was every time, everywhere, everything, ever, all at once won, looking at the others from that film, their reactions. And it's like Key's reaction when the others won their awards, Jamie Lee Curtis's reaction to every award that film won. And I think I've seen someone say, look at how unabashed their joy for each other is as well.
Unabashed is a great word, and exactly what my feeling was. When you watch that clip of his acceptance speech, it starts off with the announcement that that he's the winner, and the Oscar goes to, and I forget her name, the woman who made the announcement could barely get the words out. She was so verklempt, so overcome with emotion to be able to present the award to this guy. There's something to it, man. I mean, especially when so much of the pre-Oscars hype was about the, you know, some of the more, let's say, controversial things that happened at last year's Oscars. And, you know, and so we're like, where's the controversy going to be? Where's the controversy going to be? And instead, it was just full of joy and appreciation and love, both for the movies and for the people who make the movies and for each other. It's refreshing. It really is. I say this on the day that Ted Lasso season 3 premieres, a series that during the darkest times that many of us have gone through gave us hope for just being kind and being nice. And I really hope it's a trend that we are going to continue on, not only the being kind, the being nice stuff, but also the artistic merit of that message, which I think is extraordinarily powerful, and it makes me feel proud to be part of this industry. Hefton, you had something to say.
Yeah, no, just to go back to the point you were making at the start about the fun in movies. And about a couple of hours ago, just before this, I was listening to a podcast where they're discussing Heaven Can Wait, the 1978 Warren Beatty film, which was nominated for 7 Oscars. And if you put that by today's standards of film, I don't think, you know, that to me wouldn't stand the test of time in Oscars form, because we're looking at more kind of artistic films. And as you say, about that joy of cinema, it tends to be, and I don't know where the shift came, but it seems to be since the 90s possibly, that it's more about the artistic endeavor more than the fun of it. And some of the best moments and some of the best Oscar films for me are the ones that are more enjoyable and more fun. And, you know, as you said, it's about putting that love back out there, whereas there's nothing wrong with Nomad. I love Nomad, but then Everything Everywhere All at Once is a lot more fun than watching Nomad, you know. And no, it was interesting that the way that you were going on about, you know, that it's everybody's personal taste, which is where this vitriol comes from. I liked it, and I think with the other point, sorry, this podcast was making was that back in 78, a film like Heaven Can Wait, with TV scheduling, would have been shown throughout the 80s and the 90s on television, that you would have had to have watched it or not watched it. Whereas today we get, you know, you would have been on a Sunday afternoon, you would have watched it. Today we get to pick and choose what we want to watch on all streaming services or online. And therefore, is it the case of, because we get that choice, because we're entitled to choose what we want, we feel that we're entitled to our opinion, especially the negative side of it, I suppose is what I'm coming at.
Well, you know, my feeling is, first of all, there's a fundamental, I feel like, institutionalized, kind of normalized belief that one must choose between artistic merit and fun. And my position is that there's no need to choose. Both can exist, and both ought to exist in some, if you like, in every project that we do. It's I'm not saying there's no artistic merit in something that is less embracing of the fun, but for the movies that I respond to emotionally, and the ones that I think that many of us who are still trying to sort of break in ought to be writing, I think it's important to sort of embrace both. A movie like, but also the films that are successful, particularly in awards, so often reflect the world in which they were created, and not necessarily just in very practical ways, but I mean, like, emotionally, or the conventional wisdom of the time. I mean, there's a reason that, let's say, late 60s to mid 70s, late 60s to late 70s, maybe that decade, the successful movies, Network, Rocky, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Bonnie and Clyde, the good guys lose at the end. Bonnie and Clyde, and I mean, spoilers, but Bonnie and Clyde and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid get killed at the end. Rocky loses the fight. You know, but there's still a Pyrrhic victory to be had in at least one of those. But it's reflective of a time that was probably a little bit more accepting of grittiness, or that there was a little bit more pessimism in America, at least, you know, or in the film industry. And so the darkness kind of got reflected in there. In the 90s, when there was more of a movement towards independent film, you have the success of Clerks and Reservoir Dogs and Slacker and El Mariachi, in which all of a sudden auteurs were more popular, but also it became about appreciation of art and sort of denying the rules that were always out there. Now it's a completely different thing when we all carry around a fully functional movie studio right in our pockets, where films can be something completely different entirely for a lot less money. So I mean, James's short was made during lockdown. If 4 years ago he'd said, I'm going to do this thing during a pandemic lockdown, everyone would be like, "Whoa, is that science fiction?" And now people would say, "Oh, it's that historical drama." It's important to recognize that films in general, screenwriting in general, is a reflection of the times we live in, or a reflection of the times that we as writers are experiencing. This very thing, the thing we're doing right this minute, where we're sitting here talking with each other on the screen, might have been possible 5 years ago, but I don't think anyone would ever said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to get on Skype." And now you say Skype, and 9 people out of 10 are like, "What's Skype?" Somehow Zoom won the pandemic, but here we are. So yeah, something like Heaven Can Wait maybe was successful at the time, and maybe is more or less relevant now than it was then. But there are some Oscar movies that remain popular, or even whether or not they remain relevant to modern audiences. And I would argue the ones that remain popular are the ones which have a sense of fun about them. So people who are now watching movies decades after they were released have a reason to want to. I think more people probably one more second, Heaven. I think that more people have probably sat down and watched Rocky or Gladiator, Silence of the Lambs, because of how fun they are, more so than the fact that they are artistically relevant, even though they all are. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to agree with you, and just I think the point I was trying to make, and I'm sorry if it was a bit long-winded, is that it seems to me that back in the 70s and the 80s, and it seems maybe hindsight's a good thing, that people made the films that they wanted to make, and you appreciate them for that. Whereas now we're always looking for the art, and therefore, there's nothing wrong with All Quiet on the Western Front. It's an amazing film, but that's going to be a timeless film. That's going to last forever. That's going to be like a Saving Private Ryan. Whereas we tend to focus more on those kinds of films now at the award ceremonies than the ones that are just fun and have a lot to say, like Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, I think so. And look, there's nothing wrong with appreciating, when it comes to the Oscars, appreciating nothing more than just the pageantry of it all and the fun of it all. I think that there's a lot to be said for appreciating all that stuff. It's style, it's fun, it's a good distraction, whatever. But the people who are just so like hypercritical and mean-spirited in a world, it probably also reflects a certain amount of the world. Look, man, I mean, in the same way that something like, as you mentioned, Heaven Can Wait would be on television for a very long time afterwards, nowadays with streaming services, we wind up with the challenge being there's so much content to choose from that we don't know what we ought to be watching or what's popular or whatever. But also people who are out there just sort of mining for clicks, people who want a lot of engagement on social media for business reasons or whatever else, have probably learned the lesson that negativity mines more clicks than positivity does. It's probably part of human nature. Even people who like the movies that are getting negative response in social media will click on the things they disagree with in order to be part of the fight. And I think that the more that we can just sort of yum other people's yums and don't yuck them is a better way to live. And if you didn't like Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's okay just to be like, to say to people, you seem really happy, rather than to say, I didn't like it, but you seem really happy. It's a subtle change, but I think it's a way to sort of make the world a tiny better place, which isn't just the responsibility of writers, it's the responsibility of all of us. And it's something that I appreciate seeing when someone says, I loved this thing, we should all watch it, more so than I didn't like this thing, I don't believe everyone's watching it. Which is why I spend my courses and I spend these calls and whatever else I can saying, see Marcel the Shell with shoes on, you'll be glad you did. Because it's a movie I feel like deserves being advocated for. And I think it's crucial that we do that, to up the things that we think are great, rather than stepping on the things we think aren't quite as great. Anyone else have anything to say in the last 5 or 10 minutes? No? Great. All right. So thank you all for joining me for the second Bob's Your Script Uncle. Thank you, all of you who are watching this later on YouTube. I appreciate all you as well. Those of you who are here, thanks for coming in during your lunch hour. I hope your writing goes well. Wakanda forever. Write with joy and confidence. Stay in touch. I will see you all very, very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Bob.
Cheers, Bob.
Cheers, you guys.